This was apparently Dawkins' last public address, his last public interview, he claims.
Persuaded that you were wrong?
Well, I can do that, but it would be not on a very great issue. It would be something scientific. I mean, I can do that. In the first edition of The Selfish Gene, I ridiculed is perhaps too strong a word. I poured cold water on a theory called the handicap principle, which was put forward by an Israeli zoologist called Amos Zahavi. And predators, it clearly makes it harder to take off and fly. We all explain that by sexual selection, following Darwin, natural selection favors it because females like the look of it. It turns females on. Females find it beautiful. Now, and that's in spite of the fact that it's a handicap. So although it's a handicap, it's worth it for the male because he gets females, even though he actually loses his life, probably. He's shortened his life because of it. Zahavi took a radical view, which is that it is favored by the female precisely because it is a handicap. Females burden as a way of proving what a fine peacock he is, because he managed to survive in spite of having this rather great handicap on his back. Well, I, along with everybody else at the time, ridiculed that theory. And then later, by the time the second edition of The Selfish Gene came out, my former pupil, now colleague, and I say even mentor, Alan Graffen, my colleague at Oxford, found a mathematical model to show that the handicap principle actually works. It is theoretically sound. And now the tables are completely turned, and we all now accept the handicap principle, or many are prepared to countenance the handicap principle. And in the second edition of The Selfish Gene, I took back my earlier condemnation of it, and I ate humble pie.
Here you can see Richard Dawkins misrepresents the history of science. You can see how Dawkins mentions Darwin as godfathering this version of natural selection, evolution, that says females just choose mates because they're beautiful often, and that's all, just because they're beautiful, whereas this new idea that's now the mainstream consensus was proposed by Zahavi. He basically talks as if Darwin had this idea and then Zahavi came along, but actually the co-discoverer of natural selection, Alfred Wallace, he was the one who really, in effect, first proposed the handicap principle. Zahavi just expanded upon it, got it going, and so did some fella named Hamilton, apparently. And Dawkins even understands, he knows this full well, that the split was not Darwin and then suddenly Zahavi. It was Darwin and Wallace originally, with the sexual selection disagreement. And this one is a talk from 7 years ago, where he clearly explains that there was a split between Darwin and Wallace, and the Wallace theory has now come out to be the popular one, the mainstream consensus.
Do we need to explain what this is? I mean,
yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Darwin noticed that many biological and animal characteristics of males especially are apparently advertising to females, peacock's tails, gorgeous feathers, beautiful fish, that kind of thing. And Darwin was content simply to say that's what females like. It's an aesthetic thing, a matter of female whim. And so in order for a male to reproduce successfully and pass on his genes, he has to be attractive, and therefore genes for being attractive get passed on to the next generation because females choose them. Wallace the co-discoverer of natural selection, hated that idea. Wallace was more of a utilitarian and believed that beautiful characteristics like peacocks' tails had to be useful. It wasn't enough just to simply say females love them. You had to say this is somehow an advertisement for a good male, a male who's going to be a good father or provide good genes. Wallace wouldn't have used that phraseology, of course. And that divide between Darwin and Wallace has persisted for two major strands of theory of sexual selection. Perhaps you could just trace them to Fisher on the one hand and, well, Wallace, De Harvey, Hamilton on the other. And they're both very interesting theories. They probably might both work. I mean, what's wrong with that?
I suspect Dawkins doesn't like to mention people who didn't believe in any benefit at all for the smallpox vaccination. I don't think he likes to mention them as having any significant contribution, or especially in a way that he once disagreed with and now has changed his mind and changed his book even. I've provided a link to the article from one of the leading Wallace experts that discusses this and more, like how out of these three things, natural selection, the non-inheritance of acquired characteristics, and sexual selection, Darwin got one out of the three right in terms of what the current modern day scientific consensus is. Wallace has all three of them right. So it's more accurate to say it's the Wallace theory nowadays.